Hello, I'm Justin Katz, and it's Monday, October 5th. This is Last Impressions 52. Yes, sorry to be late with this episode. It's normally Last Impressions is at the end of the week. Makes sense. In my defense, life is starting to feel like one long week. It's kind of like what C.S. Lewis said in Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. He captured it very well. It's always winter, never Christmas here in 2020 Rhode Island. So yeah, this is Last Impressions 52. If you're watching this, I'll pause and let you take a moment to connect with us wherever you're watching or listening to this. If you can follow the Center for Freedom and Prosperity on Facebook, subscribe to the Center's YouTube channel. You can find audio of Last Impressions on iTunes. If you're there, take a moment, pause, and give us a 5-star review. I hear that's the only kind that matters. Join in the email list of the Ocean State Current. That's another good way to keep in touch with us. And again, as always, if you're watching this live, just go ahead and start a watch party. And who knows who might discover this show thanks to your generosity there. So, I have to do things a little bit differently this week. Not only am I playing with some new toys, which you can tell, obviously, the segment of not real news I have to do differently this week because sometimes you can't parody reality. You can only mock it. And that's kind of the situation we find ourselves in right now. So, for example, this is a real headline on WJAR, that's Channel 10 News. On the website, you can probably still find the story since when I took the screen capture. And the headline, if you can't read it there, is, "Are college students in Rhode Island taking coronavirus rules seriously?" Are college students taking restrictive rules seriously? Folks, if you could somehow send this video segment here back to the 80s, the folks on Saturday Night Live, back when it was good, they could reenact this with almost no changes to the script. Sometimes time can distort our memories. You remember things happen one way, and there have been studies on this. Right after the Challenger explosion in the 80s, a college professor who's taught memory and that sort of thing asked his students about what they were doing that day, and they gave him various explanations. And then he went back and checked them at the end of their college life 4 years later, and a lot of them just completely changed their memories. Well, the people who are in charge right now and running the world were young in the 80s, and they grew up at a time when entire genres of movies were devoted to laughing at authority and fearing conformity. All you have to think of, the emblem of this, is Dean Wormer on Animal House. Somehow in their memories, those old movies making fun of authority have turned into instruction videos. So here's the University of Rhode Island Health Services Director, and this is in the Channel 10 story, Health Services Director Ellen Reynolds talking about what's going on at URI.
Unfortunately, students aren't staying in stable pods, and that's what we're really going to start working on.
Stable pods. We've heard a lot about how the government is spending a lot of money on public relations and marketing. This is the best they could come up with, was stable pods. It seems to me you could maybe make a good run with this guy here if you had a song about stable pods, and something like, "I feel nice and safe because of my stable pod." That wasn't the best Barney impression, sorry. It's been a long time since I even tried. But the idea that we're now looking for stable pods in college to keep the kids following the rules. Word is, and this is not in the story, but word is Channel 10 reporter Brian Crandall did manage to find a stable pod for his segment, and he actually captured it on camera here. Very, very good to see. It's a little dark, but it was a nighttime shot. And it opened up into a beautiful flower. Stable pods do that. They become beautiful flowers, and you can see there's a gentleman sleeping there because he feels so safe. He feels so safe to be around that stable pod. So if you don't recognize that clip, this is a bit of an aside, but if you don't recognize this as the 1978 movie Invasion of the Body Snatchers, I say stop everything and go check it out certainly sometime before the election. So according to URI, they have staff members now out, this is true, out riding along with Narragansett police to catch students who are violating their stable pod rules, which is, I think, a great idea. And they do have video of one of those staff members out there. Uh-oh. Here she comes. Wait, that's not a stable pod. Stay back. Stay back. It's not a stable pod. She's putting everybody at risk. Incredible, selfish. Oh, it looks like he's caught her. He got her. He got her. Don't worry, everybody. I think that's a very good thing that they're out there watching the college students. I bet this right here, this example, definitely stopped an outbreak. So to top it all off, Governor Raimondo has announced a young adult task force. And again, this is true. This is an actual quote from the Channel 10 news story. The purpose of the task force is to try to get college-age kids to do better with rule following. Here we are, 2020. We can do it. Technology's there. We can definitely get college kids to follow the rules a bit better. You know, it's hard to know whether to laugh or scream in terror. And unfortunately, this is wrong. This is real news. All right, so conservative binder. Since the last episode of Last Impressions, there has been another Trump rally, or a Trump rally, not a flotilla, or a car parade, but an actual rally. And as you can see in the video from John DePetro here, our friendly neighborhood, mostly peaceful protesters showed up to create an atmosphere of conflict and to necessitate a wall of police. You have to kind of laugh at this. During one of the nightly Black Lives Matter marches recently, one of the protesters kicked a Channel 6 camera that was resting on the ground, and all the local journalists considered it quite an outrage. Channel 12 reporter Shaina Loscuto, she tweeted out that she also heard a few people threaten to scratch their cameras at Channel 12 because the reporters are, quote, not on their side. Then she Loscuto quickly tweeted out, peaceful protests besides those words. You know, do any of these journalists wonder, why do peaceful protesters keep bringing shields to their marches and wearing riot armor? You know what? Why? You know, if you want an image of all of this, all you have to do is notice one thing from the coverage of the Trump rally, and that's which way the police were facing. So, other conservative news. Travis Rowley, you might know if you've been paying attention in Rhode Island for a while, conservative voice for a long time. He's got a new podcast out called Good Men Exposing the Rhode Island Left. I haven't had a chance to listen to it yet, but I'll definitely be looking forward to it, and you should check it out. It's on anchor.fm/good-men. Another thing you might not know about, every Tuesday morning, 8 to 8:30, there's a multi-denominational, or whatever term you would use, prayer at the State House. And I bring this up largely because we really, really need prayers around the State House in Rhode Island. It's really obvious. Also, this week, or last week rather, on Facebook, RI Freedom Live, that's on the Center for Freedom and Prosperity's Facebook channel, Mike Stenhouse and Rhode Island Moderate Party founder Ken Block had a debate about the debate, the presidential debate that was. Definitely different views, and Mike Stenhouse had a different view from just about every commenter on the debate. It's worth checking out. Last week also, I helped John DePetro. As you can tell, I'm such a master at this technology. I helped John DePetro work out some of the technology to get himself with a background there on Facebook Live. We were just working it out. I had just exercised and was doing a Zoom meeting with him to help him work through it. And he goes live, and what do you know? Suddenly there are 150 people watching, and he actually broke some news of a sort. Apparently, one of the protesters, one of the ones actually who carries around the bullhorn shouting at the governor and police with bad language, was attending the governor's press briefing as a reporter. She got to ask 4 questions, John says. The funny thing is, a few weeks ago, you might remember John DePetro asked a question of the governor, actually I think the education commissioner, and the news reporters were saying he had usurped their airwaves and taken advantage of the fact that they had to cover it live. I didn't see any of those news media complaining that a protester was hijacking their airwaves. A little bit of an imbalance in how they go about things and their perspective. So today's essay. What I wanted to talk about a little bit today was something I find a challenge we have on the political right. Now, I know any of my moderate to progressive friends who might be watching this will scoff at the idea, but as a general matter, conservatives are less apt to stick to some belief or talking point just because it's politically necessary or because it feels good. I know a lot of people will dispute that, but I think it's absolutely true. And I think it may be one of these things that's true at our time more than always and in general. The left at this point in time is just more dogmatic. It's just how it is, and therefore dogmatic people are gravitating that way. And, hey, why not? Dogmatism has been working for the left, teaching students to follow the left's rules right away and to always believe what they're told. That's been working for them. So, it brings not only a sense of good feeling about themselves, it brings a sense of belonging, and it brings this sense of success. So they're more dogmatic these days. Of course, there's dogmatism on both sides. There's a bit of everything on both sides. But I think if you observe, what you'll see is there's an imbalance. There's dogmatism on the right is kind of a fringe thing. Dogmatism on the left, much, much more mainstream. I think the most recent Black Lives Matter rallies provide a good example. So with Breonna Taylor, as a woman who was shot by police, is the latest the latest reason for the marches. What happened to her being shot by the police was definitely tragic. But the details don't really seem to fit the cops kill black people narrative. I heard about it back when it started, I think in March, when it had first happened. And, terrible, terrible event, definitely. Definitely an indication that we need police reform along libertarian lines, but not really the reckless cops going out and racist shooting people. So since then, all summer long, this incident sort of held there in waiting until it was needed, and all of a sudden there it comes. It's the name that's being used when the police were not brought up on murder charges. And during that time, while I was in waiting, it seems like the facts sort of changed. So, like last week on Mike's, that's Mike Stenhouse and Mike Collins through the Rhode Island Center for Freedom and Prosperity's Facebook page again, they had guest Ray Rickman, who is a very well-known civil rights advocate, black man in Providence, extremely credible, intelligent, a mainstream guy on the Rhode Island left. But he simply, on this Breonna Taylor, he simply repeated details of the case that weren't true. Here's a clip.
Some of this is from the heart. You're not supposed to kill a black woman in her bed. And that's from the heart. And
well, that's another misinformation. She wasn't in her bed. She was in the hallway next to the guy.
Yes, but guess what? No, they got out of the bed.
Yeah.
So
keep in mind, I want you to watch that entire discussion, not only because I'm promoting my boss, but because you'll see that Ray is extremely reasonable, and he has personal experiences with racism and clashing with police that most people have no matching experience for. So it's worth watching his whole presentation there. But here he is continuing the idea that Breonna Taylor was in bed when she was shot, which she was not. Now, why does it matter that she was in bed? Well, it makes a stronger rhetorical point. It's a much different thing when you're the woman lying in her bed, police barge into her bedroom, holy of holies, the sacred bedroom, and shoot her, versus up at the door behind a boyfriend who just shot at the police. Now, the fact that, as Rickman said, this is something that goes on from the heart, that only puts more emphasis on the need to be careful with facts and images. I mean, emotionally, the idea that she shot in her bed is a whole nother level from the reality that she was in the hallway. Both can be tragic mistakes, but the gut reaction is different, and that's what Rickman's referring to there, is the gut reaction. So Rickman goes on to compare the clearing of the streets outside the White House when President Trump crossed over to the church that the protesters had tried to burn down. Rickman compared that to marchers in the civil rights era, as if they're comparable. And again, that phrase, peaceful protesters. I mean, maybe we can agree, if you're taking over city blocks and destroying things, trying to burn down churches, you're not peaceful protesters. It's kind of surprising to see, a civil rights advocate from back in the day actually promoting that kind of a comparison. So another example of leftist dogma, in our comments section on oceanstatecurrent.com, one of our regular liberal commenters brought up Kyle Rittenhouse. This is the young man, 17, who was trying to protect businesses and property and people from the rioters in Kenosha. And in the craziness of the evening, he shot 3 people, I think it was. Now, our commenter on oceanstatecurrent.com was bringing up his name as if he's the poster boy for right-wing violence. The facts, again, don't bear that out. And I think Tucker Carlson, I won't play the whole thing, but he has a good segment talking about this with some video for context.
For the last month, there's been an enormous amount of propaganda surrounding this case, and virtually all of it has come from the left. Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley of Massachusetts, for example, denounced Kyle Rittenhouse as, quote, a white supremacist domestic terrorist. Now, there's no evidence that is true. There never has been any evidence. It's a lie, so far as we know. So the question is, what else are they lying about? Tonight, we're going to show you context from that night, and we're going to let you decide what happened.
So now you can argue the young man Kyle Rittenhouse shouldn't have been out there with a gun, shouldn't have been trying to protect property, shouldn't have been playing hero like that. From the video that Tucker Carlson shows, Rittenhouse was rushing to put out a fire when somebody shot at him. He shot back, and that started the chain of events. People were attacking him. The facts don't support, at the very least, the idea that he was a white supremacist out there looking to gun down people. But again, it doesn't matter. It's sort of like with Breonna Taylor, his name represents an idea. It's a story that the left believes to be true in an existential way. So it doesn't matter what the facts actually are. And basically, these people stop being people and start being metonyms. Now, that's a term you might have heard of, but I learned it as a literature student in college. And it means basically when you represent something else. When you represent something as a whole, as a part of it, or as something related to it. So, for example, when a presidential administration puts out a statement, it's the White House said, even though the White House didn't say it. That's a metonym. Breonna Taylor is a metonym for racial injustice at this point. Racial injustice by police specifically. Rittenhouse, he's a metonym for the violent right. There's an association. He's representative, and so all distinction loses its relevance. So it doesn't matter that the White House can't literally speak, and it doesn't matter that the details don't fit these particular people. The left has inserted them into the group, and so they're just representations. Now, this phenomenon has been adapted in all sorts of ways lately. I could find countless examples of President Trump, something he said that's misrepresented. Maybe he's being careless with his language. That's certainly apt to be possible. Maybe he's not. Maybe he's being provocative. Maybe he's not. Maybe the haters are just going off something that he never said at all. But whatever it is he says, the media and the left run with it. And it's a like a shock, can you believe it kind of narrative, like we used to see with the reality shows, can you believe this person came out and had a tryst with this other person, and now I'm going to watch them fight on TV. That's kind of the attitude the media has. Can you believe it? And that attitude is what sticks. And that's true whether it's the claim that he said white supremacists are fine people. He didn't. Or that he called dead soldiers losers. He didn't. Or that he's misleading people about the coronavirus, which I don't believe he is. But no matter how inaccurate the claim is, the supposed statement becomes like a metonym for the belief that they think he must have, whether it's true or not. It's true in a deep way, they believe. And we see this all the time on Facebook as well. Here to bring him up again, because I was nice to him before, Moderate Party founder Ken Block posted recently about President Trump's refusal to denounce the Proud Boys, and quote, who are broadly perceived as white supremacists. Broadly perceived? By whom? I mean, that's an important question. And is it justified? I mean, since Ken posted this, the Proud Boys met with Black Lives Matter activists. They've got multiracial leaders in the group. Are they white supremacists? The questions of by whom and is this justified, those are questions I don't have time to answer. And although Ken Block prides himself on making decisions based on evidence, I see no indication that he investigated in this case. And that tells me that it doesn't matter to Ken or others whether it's accurate. Some people say this group is X, and so the president must denounce that group as X. And you have to notice here, if you follow political history at all, it's awfully easy for the people in control of the messaging, the narrative, to label people with an X and say, oh, they're broadly perceived as that, and you must denounce them. And then everybody is backed in a corner to denounce something that may or may not be accurate. And this same sort of thing is everywhere, up and down the scale of politics. In Tiverton, this is a picture of a series of tweets between me and Matt Jerzyk, who I believe is in court right now. In 2012, 8 years ago, he was visiting Tiverton and tweeted at me how beautiful it is, and I agreed. And I said, just for context, I live on the other side of town by Fall River, and that became a local controversy. And as you can see, they're still to this day promoting this as if it's somehow indicative of my true soul. Hint, I write hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of words every year. So if you're still having to go back to 2012 for a statement like that, maybe it isn't representative of who I am, even if it were bad, but which it's not. So here's a question I've wondered. Do people who see these attacks ever read the tweets or look at the basis for their comments and then scratch their heads about what's the big deal? What's so controversial here? There's nothing. I don't know. The evidence is still out. I guess it's probably split down political aisles. But the main thing is that the people who hate me locally, they know I'm bad. And this image, that tweet was a representation. It really doesn't even matter what it said. And in fact, to the extent that they can't find evidence of how bad I am, they proclaim it's evidence that I'm even worse because I'm so careful to hide my evil and my tricky words and they call it Katz math. That's it. They know the truth. They find some example that they think represents it, and they call that becomes a metonym, and then they never have to talk about facts again. And as I said, it's a problem for the right because we're not as, I don't want to say good at it, we're not as apt to do this kind of stuff. We're not, and there's not really a good response. It's a Saul Alinsky kind of trap where you can't fight back, and there's no move. It's the crane kick in Karate Kid. There's nothing they can do, until the second movie when we go to the homeland of your sensei and somebody knows the counter. But here, what we're seeing recently is the complaint about President Trump, I think mainly, is that he pushes back and does this same thing. And we see the kind of Saul Alinsky maneuver there too, right? Suddenly it's him. He's the problem for pushing back. And granted, he's always been kind of that kind of a personality. But he's pushing back. He's not afraid to get in the mud. Now, whether the problem is whether you find that admirable or inappropriate it isn't a broad solution, because you know what? Most people don't want to be like that, especially, and this is again the problem, especially on the right. And, you know, we shouldn't want everybody to be like that, because it has really obvious problems. So, yeah, it's a problem for the right. We're not as dogmatic. We try to see through, you know, we try to take in evidence and understand what's going on and be careful. And I wish I had a good answer how to respond to it. But I don't. All I can say is just, you know, be true to yourself and be honest. And in the long run, you know, that's got to win, right? Maybe. So that's it for Last Impressions this week, or last week. If you've come this far with me, I'm going to ask a small favor. If you could please go to oceanstatecurrent.com. Sign up for our mailing list. It's right over there on the end there. That's a great way for us to keep in touch with you, to know you're out there, build a bit of an audience, know you're part of our real resistance against the metonym pushers.